Chelsea Gray, if it's going to be pick and roll and Chelsea Gray is able to reject, that's already enough pressure on you. But if Chelsea Gray is also able to just stop and pop and hit this shot, there's not much you can do. And then secondarily, if you see the Chelsea Gray doing this in the playoff, you are in deep trouble. So, I mean, if you notice on these clips, you can see the matchup of who's defending Marina Mabrey in some of these. And this is where it gets interesting for the Indiana Fever.
I didn't even notice that it was Caitlin guarding her for like most of those possessions.
I didn't either. What do you mean? Nafisa Collier is the toughest one, and their X Factor is Diana Taurasi.
Oh my God, I screwed it.
No!
Welcome back to What's in a Game. I'm Grace Jean here with our very special guest, Steve Jones, co-host of The Dunker Spot. How are you doing today, Steve?
I'm doing well. I'm very happy to be here. I'm excited to be here. Excited to break down what's in the game.
Yes, so am I. We have a really jam-packed WNBA playoff slate to discuss. So we're recording on Wednesday, midway through the game twos of round one. But before we dive into that, I wanted to just get to a couple of programming notes. Nuggets Media Day / training camp is starting this week. Media Day is on Thursday. The Nuggets preseason games, their first in Abu Dhabi are on October 4th and 6th versus the Boston Celtics. We'll be breaking them down with Matt Brooks from Nuggets Media, again, friend of the show, as well as all the drama from the WNBA semifinals. So really excited about that. Steve, have you ever had the pleasure of experiencing that grind of going through the international preseason game circuit when you were coaching in the NBA?
Yes, when I was in Brooklyn, we went to. Now I'm trying to make sure I say the specific place that we went to. We went to. We played in China.
Okay, so that I heard that's a very long trip just because of all the extended media that you do.
It's very long. It disrupts like your preseason to a degree because it's like, well, you got to get these practices in, but you also got to get over there and practice. But also, everyone's very tired. So, what are you getting out of these practices? Then you got a game, maybe a practice, another game. Then you got to get back into the grind. So it throws a lot of things out of whack. For me, as the video coordinator at the time, I was very nervous because there's a lot of plugs and adapters that I had to buy and bring over there, and then make sure everything worked with the feed. So that part was stressful, but yeah, it's I didn't do a lot of sightseeing outside of like the Great Wall.
Oh, well, that's a pretty good one to see right here, right?
It was pretty dope. Don't get me wrong, but it was like I just remember being tired.
Oh, imagine the players.
Couldn't.
So you were formerly an assistant coach with the Brooklyn Nets and video coordinator with the Grizzlies. Is that right?
That
Were you
is
a
correct.
video coordinator for both?
Video coordinator my first year in Brooklyn, then I
Okay.
became assistant coach my last year, and then that was it.
Okay. And your bio says that you are famously 0-2 as a head coach in summer league. And my question is, like, what happened to the other 3 summer league games?
Okay, I can break that down. So statute of limitations is over. I know you're supposed to make yourself sound really cool. I'm 98% sure the first time I got to coach one was just an accident because we played in the Orlando Summer League and the Vegas Summer League that year. And I'm pretty sure everyone else just had early flights to Vegas. And so they gave me the honor without really telling me they gave me the honor because it was kind of by default. I pieced that together throughout the day, but it was fine. I was not going to turn it down. So what happened in Orlando was we played Memphis the first game, which was funny because I just left there like the year before. So I still knew everyone. They beat us. Then we played Miami, and there's still a YouTube clip of Justice Winslow throwing a lob to Tyler Johnson. That was against the Brooklyn Nets. And so that was the year they were testing out what is now like the W reset timeout, where you can call timeout and then you just advance the ball. But our players kind of forgot that for a second. And so we were scrambling into position, and they run this great play for Tyler Johnson, and everyone goes woo. And then I coached against Patrick Ewing, we lost. And then in Vegas, I coached the last game against the D-League All-Stars at the time, which is the last team you want to play at the end of a summer league run because they wanted to beat everyone in front of them. And I think our guys kind of wanted to go home. So A lot of losing that summer. I'm not gonna lie.
I'm sorry about that. It seems like the Nets haven't changed all that much in their main team, but the Grizzlies should be doing better. Last year aside, with the most cursed injury luck season that I've ever witnessed for an NBA team. I'm a big fan of the Dunker Spot podcast that you co-host with Nikias Duncan. It was one of the shows that helped me very early on grow in my understanding of NBA basketball concepts and schemes. I don't know if you know this. I've talked about this on the show that I was a certified casual NBA fan up until the 2023 playoffs. But the Dunker Spot was definitely one of those shows that was just like, oh, I just want to know so much more about this because you guys made it so easy and accessible to understand. How did you transition from life on, NBA coaching staff to podcasting? Like what sparked that? And how did you and Nikias end up together on that
Uh,
show?
well, one, thank you. That's awesome to hear. Makes me feel good. So salute. Also, definitely not a casual. Casuals have been downgraded. I don't have time for the rant, but it's fine. So for me, once that was over, and it's gonna sound like a weird analogy. So I grew up, I learned French, and then I ran out of French classes to take at Arizona State. So then I stopped speaking it. And so I was fluent and now I still understand it and can read it, but I can't speak it the same way. So when it came to basketball, I was like, I don't want to lose all this stuff that I've
Mm.
learned. So that's when I was like, I need to do something with it. And I just started posting the clips on Twitter or talking about basketball and that kind of thing. And so I didn't necessarily know what I wanted to do as far as like writing or anything like that. I always knew I kind of wanted to do a podcast, but I didn't want to do it by myself.
I
I
know that feeling.
don't feel like I'm really a solo act in that way. Respect people that can do it. But I don't think that's my bag entirely. So it was more so just using my basketball knowledge, trying to spread the knowledge of the game to others, and then just kind of trying to keep my brain fresh. Since I was going to be watching the games anyway, so might as well stay involved with it somehow. And so Nikias would DM me questions from time to time, and I would answer them. And then I would also like encourage him, keep going, all that good stuff. And then one day he was like, "Hey," he reached out and he was like, "Hey, I'm getting a podcast. Love to have you as the co-host." And I was like, "Actually, no, yeah, let's do it." He famously says he was expecting a no. And I was like, "Yeah, let's go for it." And then we opened up talking about the Cleveland Cavaliers and Andre Drummond, and it was potting ever since.
So your show is actually also what got me into the WNBA. I would come for the NBA playoff coverage and then stay for the WNBA discussions. And I very distinctly recall that during the 2023 NBA playoffs, you guys were still going through the WNBA regular season, talking about awards and just evaluating like players up and down every WNBA roster. And my sort of WNBA fandom sort of started with the Aces and the Liberty, which is, very convenient because they ended up, you know, the best two teams in the league and ended up in the finals last year. Were you covering the WNBA from the beginning of that show? And if not, what drove you to start covering the W?
Well, for me, I've always been a huge fan of basketball. I've always kind of thought women's basketball is just basketball, anyways. So, like going back in my personal Rolodex, like before the W, there was the ABL, and Portland had a team, and so I was a huge fan of them. I was like a ball boy for the first game, and then we had great high school teams. I went to Arizona State. We had a great team, so it's always been something I've watched and valued. I think for me, it was something that Nikias brought up very early. Like, hey, would you be willing or be understanding as far as covering the W? I was like, yeah, be no problem. I watched it all the time. I think it was important just to highlight the game and showcase it in a way that it deserved, if that makes sense. I hope that does make sense.
Yeah. No, I
Um,
completely understand that. One
because
of the reasons that I wanted to have, we had Lucas Kaplan on the show last week to talk about the Liberty, and now having you on, I really want to give the WNBA the quality of analysis that I think that it deserves, and me not having really like any experience like covering any of this. I really wanted to get people that have deeper knowledge of the league, the players, et cetera.
So it was important just to kind of, because there was so much more beyond just like, the actions they ran, the game was different, the movement was different, the tempo was different, and to be able to highlight that in a way was important. For me, it was always like I don't want to step on toes of people that have covered the game for a very long time. But then as we did it, I discovered, okay, this can just add to it. Like this is its own different lane. Now this is before this year and whatever happened this year where chaos just erupted because nonsense. But yeah, I think for me it's always fun to see people who got more into the W listening to the pod and were able to appreciate different players in different ways than maybe they had considered. Like I just enjoy that. And now you get more people talking about it, and that's just the fun part for me.
Yeah, it's interesting that you talk about wanting to highlight some of the ways that the WNBA game distinguishes itself from the NBA. Last week we did a player comp draft to help our more NBA centric audience try to understand, like, oh, these are like the player archetype that you might expect to encounter if you were to watch this team or that team, just to kind of give them a taste of like how it's similar. But obviously, like once you dive in, the women's game is a little bit different. One of the things I've noticed is that there's a lot more mid-range shots that are
Ah,
um, generated and taken. For better or worse, one of the conversations I've seen sort of circulating in WNBA media circles is this debate about how how much longer, like how far along is the WNBA in terms of incorporating, all of this like advanced analytics into how like the coaching staff operate, how they try to organize their teams and stuff like that. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I think more and more will be integrated. For me, I point to the Phoenix Mercury this year and what they're at least tried to do at the start of the season, which was we're going to take threes and layups and we're going to switch. And it kind of worked, but also it kind of didn't. So it's like, how do you have the talent to generate the type of shots you want
Mm,
consistently, especially with the
right.
different type of defenses that teams can throw at you? Like they if they switch, okay, are you still gonna be able to get that the way you want to? Or are you gonna have to run staggers? Like I think there's just different ways to get to those shots. The high post presence that each team still has, like
Yes. Yeah.
we look at a team like the Dallas Wings, who ended up having to do a lot of that by default, but that's just kind of their identity. So I think there's just a variety of teams that kind of makes it difficult to say this one thing will work in the same way.
Right. Right. No, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, so like I said before, we're recording on Wednesday, September 25th, before the Fever-Sun and Mercury-Lynx game 2. So for those series, we're going to keep our analysis limited to game ones, obviously, 'cause that's what we have seen. Ready to dive in?
I'm ready.
All right, let's go. We're going to start our deep dives with the Indiana Fever versus the Connecticut Sun. This is a 6 seed to 3 seed matchup. And I have to say, my initial impression when, like, right when this game started was, wow, Caitlin Clark's impact on crowd attendance is pretty crazy. Like, if you didn't see the court, obviously with the logos and everything, you wouldn't know that this game was in Connecticut
Constant noise. It was constant noise the whole game.
because you had large sections of the crowd cheering whenever either team was scoring. They flashed this graphic at the bottom of the screen that said the game one tickets were 178 per, which was more than the tickets to last year's finals. By, I mean, the margin was like almost 80% uh, more expensive. So that's an interesting impact. You talked about all the chaos that has come to the coverage of the WNBA this summer. A large part of that is because of the popularity of Caitlin Clark. This actually brings me to our first mailbag question it's actually our first and only mailbag question from Primetime Pete on Twitter, who asks, which NBA team still in the playoffs has the best home court advantage?
That's a good question. That's a really good question. Let's see. I'm gonna make someone mad. I'm
Have
definitely
you
gonna make
been
someone
to
mad.
every team's have you been to games at every team's arena? At least of the teams that are remaining?
I haven't been to this version of Barclays.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and it's very loud, and they have a great home court advantage. I'm still gonna go Aces.
Okay.
It gets very loud in there, and they're very good. And when they're humming at home, those runs can hit a little bit different. When it's Chelsea Gray shot, Asia does something, Kelsey Plum drive. Now the crowd is going wild, and you're trying to figure out how to, get it back in front. You saw what happened to Seattle in game 2. It's like, so I'm gonna hand it to the Aces there. I'm gonna give it to the Aces.
Okay.
Sorry, Ellie the elephant.
So the Indiana Fever lost their game 1 versus the Connecticut Sun, or Connecticut won their game 1. Expectedly, they're the 3 seed. They should have won that game. But I saw a lot of people sort of projecting that the Fever would be a lot more competitive, at least in this series, than they were in game 1, where they got kind of run out the gym. And one of the things I wanted to ask you has to do with that perception gap, I think, where, Will and I talk a lot on this show about in the NBA how much we think the regular season matters. There's always this debate about like how much does the regular season matter? Can a lower seed, make a meaningful run? All these things. But the way that I look at it, the regular season is an opportunity for fact finding. It helps to clarify these like true contenders from pretenders. Teams are able to find their identity, and in the process, they're able to demonstrate who they are to the rest of the league in the form of like how many games are you winning, et cetera, if you want to give it like a round number. So 2023 Miami Heat aside, what is your mindset on this debate? And do you think it differs between the NBA and the WNBA? That is the ability of a lower seed like Indiana to potentially make a deep and meaningful run in the playoffs.
No, I mean, I lean more towards what you're saying. The regular season is for getting the ups and downs, taking the reps, finding out who you are, what you do well, what do you struggle with, understanding, how do we grow our defense, how do we grow our offense. If you don't necessarily have that full wide spectrum of it, you don't necessarily get the best version of yourself in the playoffs, to me. So I think you need to go through a little bit of the fire. You need to be able to test yourself throughout the season to know just how good your team can be. I don't think you get that without it. Like, even just using a W example, we don't get this version of the Indiana Fever without the start of the season. So their growth throughout the entire season was really key for them. Like, did they have the same result they had in the first game of the season against Connecticut? Yes. But the first half was a lot different, and they've been able to go through different things and grow and see different coverages. I just don't think without the regular season, you need to figure out, okay, who's going to be in my rotation? Who can I trust? How do we handle these type of matchups? And you learn that in the regular season, because in the playoffs, a lot of it comes down to matchups. You're going to have to be able to be versatile to make a deep run, no matter which league it is. So I think that's a big key. I think that one difference for me between the NBA and the W, the top tier of the W is just so good. Like, the Aces are the 4 seed. Like, the Storm, as good as they were the 5 seed, they had to face each other. Every year there's a series where it's like these two teams have to face each other. It's not that you can't make a deep run, and if you're a lower seed, it's just very, very hard to beat one of those teams twice, especially one time on their home floor.
Right. You know, talking about again the Fever Sun game, you talked about how the first half was different than the rest of the game. I did think that Indiana was coming like comported themselves well. They were very scrappy and they were giving Connecticut some real problems. I thought that they were getting paint touches at will, and it wasn't just Caitlin Clark. And they were able to keep the game close. But then as the first half wound down, it felt like Connecticut was, showing that gap in just their ability to execute. They show that there are levels to this. And I wasn't sure if it was just, random, execution bobbles, or, if that's related to just the amount of experience that this Connecticut Sun team has relative to the Fever, who are quite young, in addition to, being the lower seed in this situation. What did you think of that end of first half sequence? Really, like the last, I would say 3 minutes is where I think the game really started to get away from Indiana.
The famous Connecticut Sun 9-0 run over like 2 to 3 minutes that they love to pull out of the basket. I love those. I think it was where the Connecticut Sun defense is so good and they're so active, and it's really hard to continue to sustain offense against them. And so I
Yeah.
think the fact that they were able to kind of force some turnovers during that stretch, force the offense to start a little bit earlier, farther out on the court, be a little more active on those elbow catches, and then the work they did against Caitlin Clark and pick and roll, that was kind of when they were like, okay, we're not necessarily going to show our full hand against you. Bree Jones is going to hedge out one time. You're going to get the rescreen. Bree Jones is not going to hedge out the second time. So you're calculating this in your mind. You're anticipating the next time. Actually, we're just going to go over. Bree's going to be dropped back. We're going to throw this next at you. So you don't necessarily know exactly what we're going to do. And so that kind of stalled them during that stretch. And it was a fun mini game throughout the whole game. Like Caitlin Clark kind of start to figure it out, and then Connecticut would throw something different at it. But I thought it was key because you also had different people guarding Caitlin Clark during that stretch. So it wasn't just
Hmm.
Luana, it was Marina. There was help coming. They were sitting on drives. Like they were just taking things away during that stretch and then punishing them on the other end, pushing in transition. I felt like that was the one time Indiana's transition defense wasn't as strong as it needed to be. So the hard part when you play Connecticut is that 8 point lead that they have. They can extend it and it can feel like 12 to 14.
This is a compilation of the missed shots. Caitlin Clark fans, don't come at me. I wanted to talk about this because of Connecticut's defense, but also because going back and watching it, especially in the first half, I thought a lot of the shots that she missed were shots that she could make regularly, right? But then, especially in the second half shots that you'll see in this compilation, I think especially DeWanna Bonner's length really bothered Caitlin inside the arc. And in that second half, she really struggled to get into the paint. 'Cause like I said, the Fever were kind of touching the paint at will throughout most of the first half, and that was not the case throughout the rest of the game. What did you think of the shot selection overall of Caitlin Clark? Because I think that, like I said, the first half shots were things that she could make, but I think that after the half, she started to force some tougher off the dribble looks against. You talk about all these different coverages that Connecticut was employing against her, but I thought that in whatever coverage it was, Connecticut was very aggressive in their execution in that coverage. Like nothing looked comfortable for her, especially when she was on the ball. You know, we just saw her, hit that movement three off of Flair. Yeah. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think for me in the second half, the growth from Caitlin Clark and hunting those shots has been fun to watch over the course of the season, to where she understands where the space is going to be, how to get back to that left hand, how to get to the step back, when to get to the pull up, not afraid to take them. I think in the second half, it was more I need to make these shots to make them do something different or to
Mm,
make them guard me a certain way. Because if I knock these shots down, now they're going to have to either really trap or really put two on the ball, or we can now open other things up because I've established this as a threat to a degree. So that was kind of the feeling I got from some of those looks. She was just trying to get it going. I think that it's interesting because, as you mentioned, like that one right there, Connecticut was dropped back. Caitlin Clark saw it, saw the space, let it fly. DeWanna Bonner's long, but like those are shots that if you make that, now the next time you run that set, are you going to be as comfortable covering it that way?
mm,
If she makes that shot over Marina Mabrey, are you going to be comfortable keeping your big back and pick and roll? So now, do we now dictate terms that way? I think some of the off-ball movement where she's coming off flares, you saw Connecticut working to try and rotate, but also you saw Indiana trying to empty out a side to give
yeah.
her more space to make Connecticut make a decision.
To make that
So,
rotation a lot
mhm.
longer.
So now it's one of those things where is her shot making now something that makes it a lot easier for Indiana to get to what they want to get back to offensively, because now Connecticut has to worry about that. And how do you find the balance between which shots to take and when to take them? Because it could be as simple as Kelsey Mitchell and Caitlin Clark shoot better. If those two shoot better, you got to pressure more. They get more drives. Does that put Connecticut in rotation, open up more shots? Because I want to say, what Mitchell took double-digit threes, Clark took double digits. I think Lexi took two and Dantas took three. So it wasn't like they necessarily were generating a bunch of shots for each other in a way. If they
Mm,
can improve that, how different does it look?
right. I thought that was an interesting way of framing it. How, are the shots that you're generating because the defense is forcing you to generate those shots? or are they shots that you're generating because you're trying to force the defense to do something different? And I think that really speaks to Connecticut's defense more than anything, because in either case, they're dictating the terms.
Yep, that's when they're humming. I mean, I'm sure they heard all of the Indiana Fever fans and were determined to try and make this win and make this tough as possible. You saw the effort from DeWanna Bonner, the efforts from Dejanay Carrington, the rotations from Alyssa Thomas. They just have a good versatility and a good activity, which is interesting though. So I'm interested to see actually how does Connecticut handle, because Indiana did a really good job of putting Bree Jones in action early, and Aaliyah Boston had really good success. Is that a button they tap again? Can they now poke at Connecticut's defense a little bit and make some of these things not as comfortable? They're going to have to, because if Connecticut is like, we can do multiple coverages, we can throw multiple defenders at Caitlin Clark, that's a tough zone for them to live in to win 2 games.
With respect to Kelsey Mitchell, the other starting guard for the Fever, I actually thought she had a pretty strong outing for her first playoff game. I was really impressed with just the aggression that she was playing with. She was one of the players that I think struggled in that, particularly in that end of first half stretch, like some really like bad turnovers. But it wasn't just her; it was really the whole team. And I know some giggles were had at the story that Kelsey Mitchell had consulted D'Angelo Russell about handling a playoff atmosphere. But how do you think Kelsey handled her first playoff experience?
I thought it was fine. I thought she played pretty well. I think it'd be interesting to see how do how does Indiana try and get her more involved off ball. But considering kind of the
Mm,
matchup that she had, or the matchup switched where it was a lot of Dejanay,
mm,
I thought she did a good job. But I think
yeah.
overall, it's going to be, I think for her, the biggest thing is getting in the paint, getting the drives going, and then letting the rhythm come from there. And they're going to need all of her scoring, all her drives, all her playmaking in that one, because if Connecticut's able to bother both of them, it just gets really tough. I think there were some moments where tried to go too quick, tried to attack too quick, maybe tried to not force the issue, but not necessarily get it in rhythm. Some of that was Connecticut's defense. Some of that was just Indiana's offense being where it was. So I think I expect her to play better in game 2.
So let's talk a little bit more about the Connecticut Sun, starting with Alyssa Thomas, who I think had one of the most aggressive offensive games I've seen from her really since last year. Her inconsistent level of uh, aggressiveness and hunting her own shot has definitely been a storyline this season. I vaguely recall that being the case last season as well. She was in the MVP, not just conversation. That MVP race was really close last year, and she was definitely a threat for that, because she was the engine of this Connecticut Sun team offensively as well. She has this like ridiculous looking push shot, but it felt like butter whenever she attempted it. And over the end of the regular season, it felt like not just Alyssa Thomas, but really the whole team was really um, stagnant with their decision making, just really um, slow in how they were operating on offense. And I thought Alyssa Thomas in particular, even when she was making quick decisions, it was almost never to shoot. So I was really surprised to see her come out, and she's like bodying other players to get to the rim. She's aggressive in hunting that floater. Why do you think she's finally decided to start hunting her shot in this game? So I was watching them right up until the end of the regular season and just being like ready to pull my hair out, because I'm like, you are wide open. They are playing passing lanes entirely, and you're not even looking at the basket.
This particular game, it might be where she was placed in the MVP vote and who was placed right above her in the MVP vote. That was my theory, but it goes back to
What was the order in the vote this year after Aja?
Nafisa Collier, Brianna Stewart, Caitlin Clark, Alyssa Thomas.
Oh, okay. I didn't catch that this
So there,
year.
there was that. I think it goes back to when I think Connecticut played Minnesota near the end of the season, and Alyssa Thomas saw Nafisa Collier and was trying to just drive through her chest the whole game. I was like, this is interesting. This is intriguing. She's back to
Mm.
being aggressive. You can always tell by her drives how aggressive she's looking to be. In transition, you know what you're going to get. But in the half court, when she's really looking to get paint touches, when she's trying to hit first, when she's looking for that floater, then it becomes a little bit different. I think for Alyssa Thomas, especially towards the end of the year, it was more we need to get everyone involved to a degree. Like we
Mm.
need to, especially compared to last year, this year Bree Jones is back. So you see a lot of times Alyssa Thomas gets in the paint and it's a lot of interior passing, big passing, high-low passing, those kind of things. I think when she has that aggressive mindset, that's still on the table, but I can also drive and look to finish myself. And now they have more of their pieces integrated. When she has that blend of scoring and passing, it's just really hard. So I just think it's more of it's time type of thing for Connecticut, because you also saw that aggression from DeWanna Bonner right from the
Yeah.
jump. So I
And
think,
she was hitting those shots.
yeah,
She-
and DeWanna was hitting the threes, but also some of the drives, some of the crossovers. Was like, okay, there's some intent here. The drives from Dejanay, I think it's more of the team understanding this is our moment to get it done.
I think that Alyssa Thomas's aggression in general, it kind of starts with her, and it really makes all the difference for this Connecticut Sun offense. I remember the first month of the season just being really impressed with how, like how much pace they were playing with, because that wasn't really their mo last year. And I'm like, their defense is always like what it is, which is can be incredibly stifling. But the offense seems to be what kind of goes up and down. And I was actually going to ask whether there was anything about the Fever defense that Connecticut was specifically exploiting, but then I looked up the defensive stats on the Fever and realized that in a 12-team league, in no month this season, even during their hot stretch, did they crack the top 8 in defensive rating. Um, so what did you think about the interplay there between, this Connecticut Sun offense and what the Fever were trying to do and how they ended up executing that?
Well, I think the one thing the Fever did a really good job of was focusing on Bree Jones and not letting her get the same post positions and seals. I think one big difference was once Marina Mabrey came in the game, the ways that they were using Marina Mabrey and who she was matched up against and how they were looking to exploit things was important. I think for Indiana, their defense is always more of a we need to stay solid. And I thought early in the game, they did a pretty good job of that. They were active. They were trying to be physical and aggressive against Connecticut's movement. They were forcing Connecticut deeper in the clock, forcing them to execute. But then some of the one-on-one contain got lost. Some of the help wasn't as strong. And the key to beat the Indiana Fever is to make them sustain defense, make them keep
Mm.
moving, make them keep rotating, make them keep making decisions. If you were going to play, I don't want to say quick, but if you're going to get lulled into their type of game and not make them work defensively, they get stopped, stick out, and run. That's when they're at their best. If you kind of make them sit down and guard multiple actions, multiple options, you might be more likely to get a breakdown, but you're also more likely to wear them out because of the way they play on the other end of the floor. So I think for Indiana, it's just more be more solid, execute better, fight through screens, and you gotta figure out how you're gonna defend or who you're gonna have defend Marina Mabrey in this game.
That's one of the things that I have found an interesting bit of analysis whenever analysts talk about how the Nuggets play. They play so slow, they make you guard for not the whole shot clock, but the back half of the shot clock because they tend to get pretty deep into it, and how that impacts the pace of the opposing team, whenever the Nuggets are actually doing well, like which team's controlling pace. And when you have an opponent who does like to play faster on on both ends, but especially on offense, and you're able to wear them down by making them guard you, the entire shot clock and play at your pace. The interplay between that and how you're able to wear them out on the other end too is interesting, and not one that I'd considered. And why would it be that playing a team that plays slower could actually impact your pace on the other end too? And that energy aspect is interesting. So I watched a lot of the Connecticut Sun mostly earlier in the season and then late in the season. And when it comes to Marina Mabrey, who had 27 points off the bench, which is apparently a playoff record for a bench player, I just have to understand why is it that the Chicago Sky traded her? I don't really understand why, especially when you see how Chicago ended their season. They're not exactly like, at least in my experience of the Chicago Sky, like the highest powered offense either. So getting rid of this scoring punch off the bench, this player who is so comfortable both on and off the ball, seems like she fits lots of different places. I don't understand that.
I think Marina Mabrey was looking for a moment like this, and she sure made it known when in this time with the playoffs, wanting to compete and wanting to win, and to perform like that in this game, make history. I think was key. So if you look at, I think the biggest thing is the different types of ways that you can use Marina Mabrey is important. Can use her in the post. Obviously, spot up shooting is key. So if you even bring that clip back, Dewana Bonner driving, that's going to force help, but it's a lot different when it's Marina Mabrey that you can kick it out to. And so that's where, okay, Indiana has to make decisions when they're going to help, how they're going to help, if they're giving up drives. And now Connecticut can get the ball in rotation, get it to Marina Mabrey, who can end the possession, get it to Marina Mabrey off screens. So we talk about kind of the tempo that they play with. But if you're able to kind of just have someone who can just fly off a screen, finish a play, make your defense rotate, continue to feel and drive. And now she has kind of that self creation that Connecticut needs to a degree, to
Yeah.
where she's going to get them up. Like that's just there's no doubt. With the Sun, there's always kind of been the guard play is important. Are
And
the
she's
guards going to
scoring at
shoot?
every level of the floor. Like,
Yes.
I just feel like every team wants a player like this. So I
Yeah.
don't understand why Chicago would give her up.
She fits right in to what Connecticut's doing, and I think if you notice on these clips, you can see the matchup of who's defending Marina Mabrey in some of these, and this is where it gets
Ah,
interesting
yes.
for
Mm.
the Indiana Fever, because now there's nowhere to necessarily place it, because Marina can be used in different ways. So you're gonna have to navigate those screens. You have to make it tough for Marina. You have to make her take some of those pull ups or step backs, and make it tougher on her. But when she's
Yeah.
coming, Connecticut's very good.
Look at that. I didn't even notice that it was Caitlin guarding her for like most of those possessions.
I didn't either. What do you mean?
No, I actually didn't. I was just like, wow, she's scoring so much. And then you're like, oh, what was the defense doing or not doing? Yeah, that's another thing, right? You want to wear out the other team's best player, and Kaylin is certainly one of the major engines of that Indiana Fever offense. Was there anything else that you wanted to say about this matchup before we move on?
I think it'll be interesting to see how the Fever handle the rotation, and then kind of the balance of what they try and do offensively in game two. Obviously, it hasn't happened yet, but I'd be intrigued to see that. Connecticut's got to throw everything at them again defensively to go ahead and get this done. I'm sure they'll be motivated to.
Awesome. So let's move on to the Storm Aces matchup, which is the 5-4 matchup, which the Aces have clinched in this round one series. And I have notes on both games 1 and 2. So I want to focus more on the Seattle side because I have some questions about what they can do moving forward. In game 1, it was a very I mean, both games had a very strange, I think, tempo to them. The Aces had a very slow start, although Aja Wilson had a very strong start individually, especially with her scoring. Though I thought that Seattle's interior defense gave Aja some problems, more so in game 1 than in game 2, where I was like, "Oh, no. Aja looks comfortable whenever she's looking to score now." Whereas in game 1, where I think it was Mercedes Russell was guarding her for the most part, but then obviously Seattle is coming in with help from Ineka and Gabby Williams as well. Aja was struggling when she got closer than, like, 8 feet to the basket. It seemed like the Storm were just saying, like, "Nope, you're not gonna have anything easy." But then, of course, Aja can make the hard shots as well. The Aces had a very slow start to this game as a team, though, and I thought that, it was a lot of it was just driven by Seattle's defense. They were getting tons of deflections and runouts. And the Aces were able to kind of change up the tempo a little bit by going small. And but then in the second half of game one, they went back in with their starting lineup and they were able to play the Storm a lot closer to even more so than that same lineup had done in the first half. And it really felt like the difference was just like their energy and their intention defensively. In the end, at the end of that game, both teams tightened up on defense. You know, the Aces only scored 14 points in that fourth quarter, but Seattle went 0 for 11 from the field with a minute and a half to go, and they didn't score the rest of that game. Someone said that it was the fewest field goals made in a fourth quarter since 2006. And I'm like, isn't zero the fewest that is possible? um, yeah, so the Aces ended up winning that quarter 14-2. Seattle had some free throws there. I thought putting Sid Colson on Skylar Diggins-Smith was just like basically the death knell for Seattle because they weren't able to create anything easy. And Aneka was facing hard doubles out from like 15 feet and having trouble passing out of it in a way that the defense couldn't recover. This is a little tongue in cheek, but when I want to ask, like, does the opposing team score really just depend on how much the Aces want to defend in that particular game?
I mean, this is the one thing I've said. If the Aces play defense, it's very hard to beat them. So, like, when the Aces decide that we want to buckle down and show help and protect the paint and fly around, you're in for a long day. Like, that was my thing when the Aces were struggling. They were 6-6. I was like, hey, they just shore the defense up, they'll be fine. And over the course of the season, they got in the right direction. Now in the playoffs, they're back to playing defense and being able to survive a game like this, where they just 1 for 8 in the first quarter, and no guard can get in the paint, and they're not making any shots. And I think that game was summarized by like the Storm went on like a 7-2 run in that first quarter, but that was over like 4 minutes. Then the Aces went on an 8-2
Yeah.
run in like the first 2 minutes of the second quarter. I was like, oh no, I don't know how much wiggle room you have. But yeah, I would agree with that. When the Aces guard, you're gonna have a long day.
Yeah, and like you said, the 7-2 run over a 4-minute span isn't exactly indicative of like a high-powered offense. But I did think that Seattle really battled in both of these games. Like I
Mhm.
said, the rhythm was really like stilted in both game 1 and game 2. Throughout the game, even the broadcast was commenting on it, how the Storm were mostly keeping it a 1 or 2 possession game throughout most of the game before the Aces pulled away. But it felt like they should be up like 12. Like it never felt like the Storm were like wrestling back control of the game from the Aces. And I just felt like yeah, in both games, even when they were having their stronger stretches, their offense really needed a punch. But from what area do you think Seattle really needs the most from their players? Like which positions do you think? And why is it that Jewel Lloyd wasn't the like spark that they really needed her to be? Just to give like some kind of punch to this offense.
I mean, you saw the attempts go up in game two from Jewel Lloyd. She was very aggressive at the start of that game. You know, I'm not sure. It didn't seem like she was 1,000% the Jewel Lloyd we've seen. I think for Seattle overall, it's year one of a talented team trying to figure it out.
Mm,
They're trying. I think they need more shooting in particular, just to be able to have more spacing on the floor. I also think they need more playmaking. So one thing that stood out to me in this series, if you look at game one, the Storm made 25 field goals, they had 15 assists. In game two, 29 field goals, they had 18 assists. Skylar had 10 of those in game two. So who's
yeah.
making plays for each other? For them, it's about their tempo in the half court, being able to execute and keep pressure on a defense consistently, I think is one of the things that makes it tough. I think Gabby Williams and her drives help, but if a defense goes under, and they can show help off of Ezzy spaced or NECA spaced and feel like they can recover, it just makes it tough. Because now, okay, we help, we recover. You have to get an advantage again. And how are you going to get that? I thought they did a creative job this year at certain times trying to invert their offense and use their talent together. But I mean, you have to kind of go through this. And and again, you're facing the defending champs.
The two-time defending champs.
So I mean, it's a hard path to navigate. Especially, I think the difference between game one and game two, it's one of the toughest things about playing the Aces in the playoffs is once you show your hand, they are now prepared for it. They
Yeah.
are ready for whatever you're gonna do. So you saw the difference from Las Vegas at the start of game one from game two. They felt way more comfortable on both ends of the floor, more organized, more understanding of what they want to do on both ends. Kelsey Plum, way more aggressive. Chelsea Gray stayed aggressive. Asia was locked in as always, and that's where it's really hard to beat this team in a playoff series.
What does one do when Chelsea Gray is hitting the types of shots that you see here? I mean, you talked about how Seattle needs more playmaking. I think that I was more thinking about the shot creation aspect of it because they had so many people trying to create tough shots against, a really like tough defense, a stout defense, and then not doing that. So it's those stats on the assists are interesting to me because you'd think that on a team that doesn't have like the best like tough shot creators necessarily, you would see more ball movement, but they didn't. Meanwhile, the Aces have in Chelsea Gray and Kelsey Plum and Tiffany Hayes, right? Uh, and Jackie Young, players who can hit these tough shots off the dribble against a stout defense.
So one, Chelsea Gray, if this is going to be pick and roll, and Chelsea Gray is able to reject, that's already enough pressure on you. But if Chelsea Gray is also able to just stop and pop and hit this shot,
Yeah.
there's not much you can do. And then secondarily, if you see the Chelsea Gray doing this in the playoffs, you are in deep, 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 deep trouble. So I mean, when Chelsea Gray is able to, if you notice the time of the clock, 7 on the clock, late in the possession, you've done a very good job defensively against the Aces. You're going to have these moments where maybe you get them to struggle in the half court, to be stagnant. When she hits these kind of one-on-one shots, they're just backbreakers. They're tough to deal with. And when she's hunting them, they're backbreakers. So you defend this pick and roll, you go under, that's fine. This is good defense. Chelsea Gray still scores. You get nothing out of it. So
Yeah.
she has the ability to take whatever your scheme is and just throw it right on over the top rope and punish you in a way that really hurts you because the Aces are not easy to guard. They have all this talent. So when you put all that effort on the defensive end and it results in that hurts.
That was the thing is I think that Seattle was playing really good defense on like 90% of the possessions throughout the first two games in this series, the only two games in this series. And it just didn't matter because you had Chelsea Gray hitting those shots and now you have Kelsey Plum with these drives and finishes that are just kind of backbreaking. You're like, "Oh god, now we have to deal with this too."
So even if you bring the video back to the start, there's one thing Kelsey did made an adjustment on in game two. It was just understanding, A, I need to get in the paint. I can't go a million miles an hour. I need to give them some doubt. So if you look at when she catches it
Mm.
here, there's going to be a hesitation.
They're going over because of her ability to shoot.
hmm And then if you see notice this hesitation, so Seattle technically, Skylar's like, Gabby, you're switching, right? And Gabby's like, I'll help you, but you got it, right? It didn't happen. But Kelsey also helped by being like, you know what? Let me wait, hesitate, drive, finish over a big, or, set up, come off a pin down, wait for my space. Let me see what you're doing. And then, okay, this is the space I have. You're there. Now I'm at you. So she did a much better job in that game of just kind of taking the space, understanding what was happening, and not necessarily trying to go a million miles an hour in the paint. And her drives have been so key. I know a lot of times, I think this season in particular, people point to the shooting percentages at times, and she
Oh,
wasn't
you don't
finishing.
want that either. You're talking
Oh,
about the
exactly,
Chelsea
exactly.
Gray shoulder shimmy. You don't want Kelsey Plum yelling at the crowd either.
Well, 99%
If you're
sure,
the opponent, if you're the opposing team.
or you don't want her yelling at the refs. That means she's into the game. But again, that shot fake right there is just understanding the space and now controlling that possession. So I'm coming off. You have to come respect me. Now I've got you off rhythm, and now I'm into you. I'm finishing. Great finishes, by the way. But I think when she's
Great.
able to drive at that level, it just gives the Aces another punch. And especially for a lot of teams, they may not have 3, 4 defenders or 3 defenders to handle all 3 of those guards. There's likely going to be an advantage somewhere for them.
Yeah. And on that last clip, it was Gabby Williams trying to guard that guard Kelsey on that drive on the closeout. And you shout out to Gabby Williams because I thought that she was really trying to will Seattle to a win in game two, like both ends of the floor. I was really astounded by her energy. Like everyone knows that she's like this good defensively, but she was hitting threes. She was actually able to create some tough shots in the mid range as well. And getting downhill in transition and trying to play make out of that too. And my goodness, her athleticism is actually quite breathtaking in the half court. How she's able to attack a closeout if a closeout comes. So I just wanted to give her a shout out. But with respect to Kelsey Plum, who do you think the New York Liberty are going to guard her with? Because the Liberty, they have we're going to talk about their lineups a little bit more when we get to that series, but they have options with how they even, formulate their lineups to match up with the Aces. But I think that they don't have great options in the backcourt that are great two-way players. They have some great defensive backcourt options, but you don't necessarily want them to be, important for the offense in any given lineup. Uh, yeah, what are your thoughts on how the Liberty are going to guard Kelsey Plum when they have all these other, weapons on the Aces that they have to worry about?
I'm a big believer that the lineup change they made was also specifically for this series. I feel like a lot of the
Mm,
moves the Liberty made was specifically for this series. I think it's going to be either Leonie Fiebich or Bernard Hamilton. They've usually had Fiebich on Chelsea Gray. They've given Sabrina the Jackie Young matchup, and Sabrina's held up. I think there's going to be a lot of switching. But I think the overall concept for the Liberty just has to be activity and keeping the ball in front and containing the drive and using their size and length to their advantage defensively. And then Sabrina has to hold up her end of the bargain. Whoever she switched on, she has to be able to guard um, and defend one-on-one. And this is where the Chelsea Gray factor probably factors in the most for me. I think Sabrina in their last matchup was okay against Kelsey Plum, did her job against Jackie. If Chelsea has it going, I think it's a little different. So now does Chelsea, I don't know if you want to give that switch. I don't know if you want to give that matchup. I don't know how you want to react to that. So that's probably where my head is at right at the start. But I imagine they'll use size and length against Chelsea and Kelsey.
okay. What do you think Vegas's biggest challenge will be in their semifinal matchup against the Liberty?
The biggest thing for Vegas, I think it's going to be the defense. They're going to have to defend consistently. And this is depending on which version of the Liberty show up. If it's the version of Liberty that move the ball, go side to side, keep pressure on you, force you to make decisions and rotate, that gets difficult for the Aces, who sometimes have had trouble this season sustaining defense or being consistent on that end. Now, if the Aces are able to contain the drives, they're able to switch, they're able to have an impact. We've seen the Aces have success against the Liberty team. But that probably is the number one thing in my head is what could be an issue for Vegas's defense.
Yeah. Is there anything else that you wanted to say about the Storm Aces matchup before we move on?
It's a fun series. We'll see what the next version of the Storm looks like, but Aces just gave a reminder of who they are.
Yeah. All right, then let's move on to the Liberty Dream matchup, which was the 1-seeded New York Liberty versus the 8-seeded Atlanta Dream. So there were 2 games in this series, only 2 games. The Liberty kind of packed them up. I actually want to start our discussion with game 2 because of this upcoming matchup with the Aces. I think that unlike game 1, in game 2, the Dream really forced the Liberty to get it out of the mud. They were much better defensively, both in the half court and transition, and they were playing very physical, and the Liberty weren't able to get anything comfortable, both on ball and off ball. It was difficult to get open. Atlanta ended up going quite a bit smaller for large stretches of this game, and I thought that I found it interesting that you think it's going to be Leonie Fiebich who has the most important role guarding the Aces backcourt, because I think that she had a tougher time containing the smaller Atlanta guards at the point of attack, especially Jordan Canada, who, she is what she is. But her off ball impact remained because Atlanta went a little bit smaller, but we're still able to maintain a high level of physicality defensively. The Liberty were able to they had an advantage on the size, especially in the front court, but also Sabrina because they play a little bit bigger in their starting lineup now with Courtney Vandersloot coming off of the bench, and they were able to work hard to get easy shots. I thought that Sabrina was incredibly physical on her drives, just whenever someone went over the screen, getting them on her hip and just getting downhill and trying to create, the shot that was closest to the basket as possible. Obviously, she made some like spectacular threes in this game as well, but I thought that she wasn't settling as much as she sometimes does on these drives in this game, and I thought that was huge. Um, my question, though, actually has more to do with Sabrina on the defensive end in this game because, I mean, she was spectacular scoring, but I felt like it was just about every other possession that her or Leonie were getting, mostly Sabrina really, were getting lost off ball or blown by, or blown by one of the smaller guards on the Dream, especially Jordan Canna, but also Alicia Gray. And that was really concerning to me. And the whole time I'm watching this game, I'm thinking, man, this scoring game is really great from Sabrina. So efficient. The shots that she's creating are great. The finishes that she's getting in the paint are great. But I didn't like what I was seeing from her defensively. Argue with me about that.
Well, I think the thing is the key for the Liberty, and the one way you can get the New York Liberty's defense is dribble penetration, one on one. Beat them off the bounce, force them to rotate. You can get them in rotation. They're good. The flip side is sometimes the people that are rotating are very good at defense because it's Breanna Stewart and it's
hmm
Benigilani Hamilton and it's
Yeah.
Jonquel Jones. There's a trust there. So there's a lot of times where Sabrina may get beat off the bounce, but she's funneling it. Like
Yeah.
there were
Yeah.
plays in that game where, okay,
Yeah.
I got beat. I'm not pursuing it anymore because I got beat, and y'all know I got beat. Someone's got me, right? And they usually do. They usually have someone in the paint. Now you don't want to live with that all the time,
All right.
but this is where Breanna Stewart's so good because there were plays in that game, especially early. I think it was Alicia Gray caught at the top of the key, and the whole left side was open, and you could see Alicia Gray was about to drive left, and Breanna Stewart saw it and actually was like, "No, I'm going to stand right here at the elbow for a quick moment and let you know you're not going this way," and then she got back out. So little plays like that help the Liberty. It's just how much can Sabrina stay solid and do her job, and it just can't be in every drive occurrence, which is what
Right.
it can't be every single time. It has to be activity. It has to be keep it in front, contest, you mix those in, and then you live with some of the blow-bys at times. I think the thing for me with Phoebus is more the whistle. What is the whistle going to
Yeah.
be like for
Yeah.
her? Because it hasn't always been the most kind. And so if she gets in foul trouble, how much does that alter what you want to do and alter some of the versatility that you have lineup wise? But I think that's the Liberty's whole idea to improve this year was to have more length, more versatility to surround it around Sabrina so that okay, we know what this is defensively, but we have more around it to insulate it to a degree. As opposed to last year, it was like, we need scoring, so I have to put two of these guards out here at the same time. And now we have to worry about two of these. You know what I mean? They've kind of changed that up a little bit.
Yeah. Speaking of Leonie Fiebich, I did want to talk a little bit about her game one and then get into a little bit of a broader discussion about the WNBA. She started, obviously, in both of the first two games for the Liberty with Courtney Vandersloot coming off of the bench. In game one, she had 21 points, incredibly efficient, a lot of them on threes, great play finisher, and she's also like a good connector within that Liberty offense. And she's a rookie. The Liberty were able to sign her from overseas, and this has been an ongoing theme or discussion in the media that the team has been putting out throughout the season. In men's basketball, it feels relatively widely accepted that the NBA has most of the best men's players in the world, Noah Lyles aside. And if for no other reason than the NBA, it definitely pays better than most alternatives at almost every pay scale, right? The WNBA is a different league with respect to how much players are paid relative to their international competition. And they have different league revenue. Obviously, players union is in a different place right now, and they also have a hard salary cap in the WNBA, unlike the NBA. Although the second apron is starting to become a little bit of that. Um, where pay in the WNBA, I was looking at a couple of charts on this, is actually quite similar to international women's basketball leagues. And I wanted to bring this up with Leonie Fiebich because, of course, the Liberty signed her from overseas. She's German, but I believe she was playing for maybe it was a Belgian league. Um, what do you think about where the WNBA is in terms of both the perception of having the best players in the world and actually having them?
I mean, I think because of how good the top talent is in the W, how l- few amount of teams there are at the current moment with expansion, how many few spots there are roster
Mm,
wise. I think that you can make that argument. Do they have every great player in the W? No, there's some great ones. Like I don't. How many people know? Leonie Fiebich was all EuroLeague first team.
oh,
But I
that's
think,
awesome.
but
The
I think,
Liberty knew apparently.
but I think there's a balance there where if you are like the best are here, it's like it's so condensed and hard to play. You look at the draft, how many players get drafted and they just don't make the team. Like it's just difficult to make it in the W. So I would understand calling it where the best are at, but it doesn't mean that there are not talented players outside. Like Emma Mieseman, very good in the W, very good outside of the W. Didn't want to play. Showcase how good she is again at the Olympics. These things happen.
Yeah, actually, I had a note about this earlier with Gabby Williams. So she was drafted into the WNBA, but I think she had missed like most of the last two seasons because of some rule with the French Federation where they had to have her for training camp. But we talked about this last week with Lucas Kaplan, how obviously the Olympics comes in the middle of the WNBA season, as opposed to the NBA where it's an off-season timed thing. So she wasn't playing, but then after the Olympics are over, she signs a deal with the Seattle Storm and comes over. Now she's starting in the playoffs. And I'm like, oh, that's so strange that not that anyone would make that decision because part of it is like, oh, I could just play overseas and make basically the same money. Whereas I don't know that, if the Olympics came in the middle of the NBA season, I don't know if you'd have NBA players that were explicitly sitting out an entire year, um, uh, in order to fulfill the rules of their national team's training camp policy to go maybe play overseas, just because of that pay differential that doesn't exist between the WNBA and their overseas counterparts. Obviously, their Team USA women's basketball team, total juggernaut, similar to the men's team. So I just wanted to shout that out. I'm really excited for the Liberty Aces round two. Is there anything that you would like the viewers to pay attention to in that matchup that we haven't already discussed?
Do we have the Sabrina clips actually? It was just this little hesitation right here is really key for her. So when she makes quick decisions and she reads the defense, it's a different player. But when she kind of goes into like a pre-animation on these drives, it's where
Hmm.
she can get in trouble. So if she takes her time and gets to the second level and now sees that she can turn the corner, that's when she really pops in those pick and rolls.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's toggling between the pull up and the drive that gets tricky. Okay. Sorry.
Oh, that
That
was a
point
good
was in my
pass.
brain.
No, that was good. That was good. I
My
realized
bad.
in putting these notes together that we were talking a lot about some really impressive guard play on all of these teams between Kelsey Plum, Chelsea Gray, Sabrina, obviously Caitlin Clark, although we have some things that maybe need some cleaning up from her and team wide, as well as Marina Mabrey off the bench for the Connecticut Sun. Um, Definitely. Would you say that the WNBA is as much a guards league as it feels like the NBA is?
Ooh, I can't get all the way there because of
Okay.
how much talent they have with bigs
Mhm.
and how like they're growing with versatility. Like the way that Asia Wilson and Brianna Stewart and even Alyssa Thomas, Lee Boston, Nneka. I mean, they can hurt you in so many different ways. They can be used in so many different ways. You still need that size element, like Nafisa Collier being able to score in different ways, post up, attack, be used in inverted pick and roll. It's still a bigs league, but there's a lot of
Mhm.
great guard play, and you can start to see they're finding different ways to impact the game as well. And I think that combination is what makes it so fun to watch these days because it's so many players can do so many different things, and offensively you can use them in different ways.
Speaking of Nafisa Collier, let's talk about the last series here, the Mercury Lynx. This is a 2-7 matchup between the Phoenix Mercury and the Minnesota Lynx. Their game two is later today, but game one was the most interesting game of the night on Sunday. I mean, what a show. Minnesota went up, I think they were up like 23-26 at one point, and then they were kind of holding steady at like 18. And then in the second half, the Mercury were just chipping and chipping and chipping away at that lead. And they took a lead late in the fourth quarter. Uh after a first half, boat racing, I thought, with Minnesota. I think that even when in the first half the Mercury were trying to like hold on or chip into the league, or the lead of the Lynx, it was layups and threes for Minnesota versus mid-range shots for the Mercury. And then that was really in large part because the Lynx were getting steals, deflections, getting out and running, and really like ran up the score by just getting out in transition. Nafisa Collier looked incredibly comfortable throughout this game. I think people have talked about the Lynx having, size issues sometimes, and but Nafisa Collier uh, looked like the biggest player out there because she just looked comfortable with whoever was on her, even when it was a bigger player. Like she could outquick them to get to her shot. Just such a versatile shot creator. Do you have anything to say about her particular performance in this game, or how Minnesota was able to gut out a win after blowing such a massive lead?
Well, I think the thing with Minnesota is they put so much pressure on you with their offense, with their movement, with their cutting. They have five players they believe in who can drive, pass, and shoot. So they're always going to make you sustain defense. You saw that in the
Mhm.
first half. The Mercury didn't have any fun. Like the the Lynx kept them moving. White jerseys had to keep rotating. They tried to play zone. White jerseys had to keep rotating, and that's just what the Lynx do. I think with Nafisa Collier, what makes it so tough is there's no one thing you can take away from her because of how the offense functions. She might grab a rebound and push it herself. Now she gets a screen, and now it's a rescreen. She rolls to an empty side. Now she's slicing off a cut into a post up. She's a really good cutter on the weak side. So she cuts back door if you help. Different things that they can use her in makes it really tough. And in this series in particular, with the Mercury having to switch, you end up with Nafisa Collier having some matchups that she enjoys.
Yeah.
And that just makes it overall a tough recipe. I think the thing for Phoenix that they did well in game one was finding a way to have more activity in that second half, finding a way to kind of slow the Lynx down just a little bit, get them to look at something for an extra second or
You have to
speed them
keep
up
your
a little bit. That's the key. I think Phoenix,
Mhm.
for them to win, it's going to take bucket getting. Like they're going to need Diana Taurasi, they're going to need Codd, they need Tasha Cloud. They have to find a way to score. They did that. Unfortunately, the defense, they didn't have enough of it because of how Minnesota functions. I
Yeah.
think what Phoenix kind of did there in that second half was got the ball downhill. Let's go guard screens. Let's see if you guys want to switch. Your defense is very good, but how many times do you experience this? Okay, oh, you didn't switch cleanly. We can drive, turn the corner, for some help, get some threes, mix in some of these pull-ups, and we can kind of battle our way back. It'll be interesting to see what game two looks like. Because again,
Yeah.
Minnesota may be more prepared for this. So was that just Phoenix's shot? Or is it something they can build on?
Yeah. I mean, do you have any predictions for game two?
I think the Lynx win another hard fought battle.
Okay.
Because I've maintained through the ups and downs the Phoenix Mercury, not a team you want to see in the playoffs. They showcased that at least in the second half. It's just going to be, can they generate enough on both ends? Because when they have the good offensive moments, feels like the defense goes the other way. When they have the good defense, feels like the offense goes the other way. There's like 6 times where they were like down by 1 and they couldn't get over the hump. They finally did, then they gave it back, and it's just okay. It's
Yeah.
a tough recipe to deal with for Phoenix.
Yeah. So, assuming perhaps wrongly that Minnesota clinches the series tonight, would they rather face the Fever or the Sun in round 2?
For me, I think they would much rather face the Indiana Fever. I mean, no disrespect with that. I think with the Fever, they feel like they can move the ball and force them to guard in a different way. Connecticut's just not a fun team to play. Even though they did just beat the Connecticut Sun, I think it was a 2-point win. That's just not ideal. You're going to end up being in the 70s. It's going to be a gross game, and I think they would prefer the Fever.
Yeah, I think I agree. Also, the Sun could take advantage of their rebounding woes, uh, just as a matchup specific issue. All right, well, let's move on to our fun segment.
Fun! I
Yeah,
like fun. What's
we're
this?
gonna
What we
do
got?
fun. So this is the shot clock violation. So we're gonna have 24 seconds on the clock each. All right. The way
Okay.
that this works is, Will, can you speak so that we know we can hear you?
Yes, disembodied voice Will. I'm here.
Awesome. For each remaining playoff team at the time of recording, some teams might be eliminated by the time this episode comes out.
Okay.
You're going to name their biggest X factor and the single opposing player on their path that could give them the most trouble, and no repeat answers allowed from each other. So
Okay, so are you going first?
I was going to offer you to either go first or second. I think there's advantages to either, but you can choose as the guest.
I'll go second.
Oh my gosh.
Why? I'll go second. I will go second.
It's a smart choice.
Oh my gosh.
It feels more fun that way. So I
named... All right, you want to... Okay, you like a challenge. All right. No, that's good. Well, and I went to go see Legally Blonde, the musical, and I love that that scene where she's like, I want the dangerous one because I like a challenge. Now let me say.
All right, Grace. And start. Liberty.
Sabrina Ionescu and Aja Wilson.
All right. Sun.
Marina Mabrey and Nafisa Collier.
Okay, Lynx.
Bridget Carlton and Alyssa Thomas.
Oh, you're done. Nice try.
Dang, that was way harder than I thought it'd be. Okay.
should we do an offensive rebound? Reset 14?
No, that's good.
All right.
So
24 seconds.
In 3, 2, 1. Aces.
Brianna Stewart, or no, X Factor Chelsea Gray. Brianna Stewart is the other one.
All right. Then Fever. Fever.
Caitlin Clark and Dewana Bonner.
Mercury.
Nafisa Collier is the toughest one, and their X Factor is Diana Taurasi.
Oh my God, I screwed you up.
No, it's a tie. That's a fun one. I like that. That was hard.
That was hard.
Right.
We need to do more shot clock violations because these are always fun.
I definitely screwed you up. It's hard to type in give the clock, at the same time, Grace.
I would say that is a lot to
do. Still getting used to that.
Awesome. Well, Steve, it has been so fun having this discussion with you about the WNBA playoffs. Is there anything that you want to plug for our audience?
Just listen to the Dunker Spot. Go subscribe where it's available on all podcast platforms. I'm very bad at plugging things, but if you would just do that for me, that'd be fantastic. And then we'll just go from there.
It's a great listen, and you guys, if you listen to the show, should listen through the NBA stuff all the way through the WNBA stuff. Such a fun show and so informative. So really grateful to have it out there. All right, then. Over half of you are not subscribed, according to the YouTube analytics. So if you do like our content, please remember to subscribe, like, share, hit the notification bell, leave us a review, preferably 5 stars, on Spotify, Apple Music, and Amazon Music. Follow us on Instagram and TikTok at What's in a Game NBA. We have it's not a new clip channel at this point, but we have our clip channel at What's in a Game NBA Clips. And always remember that winning is fun and losing sucks.